Exploring abandoned places can certainly be a fun activity, but you always run the risk of finding something that you can't explain, or someone who doesn't want an explanation and just wants to harm you. I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. On my travels, I discovered a very beautiful, possibly 100-year-old villa on the banks of the river Doruo, crumbling hard, swallowed by vines and other types of vegetation, and surrounded by palm trees. It's a stunning place, but man did it raise some spooky questions. My boyfriend and I found it last year and spent a good chunk of the day exploring it. We went back this summer, and the vines and wild grasses and whatnot had really taken over. We almost couldn't find it again. We had to wade through shoulder-high grass and ferns, very prehistoric looking. First off, before you even get to the house, you have to make your way through some serious wild grass and vines, etc. The first sign that there used to be a mansion there is a shaded cave, which looks every bit as Victorian as you'd expect, with some carved stone benches overgrown with moss and a natural spring at the back. Directly above the spring, however, there's a hole in the rock wall and a passage tunnel just big enough for an adult to crouch down in and skitter along into the pitch darkness. Assuming you got over that and retrieved your heart from the bottom of your stomach after staring into the abyss long enough that you could swear you saw someone in there, you'll find more caves in the rock wall below the house. The biggest one confirms that they are all a series of secret passages. The mouth of it is stuffed with some kind of old chairs and a nightstand, presumably to keep nosy tourists out, or to keep something in. Once you've recovered from that too, and you'll get to the house itself, the first thing you'll notice are these huge stone vats in the cellar, which we assumed were for making wine, and hundreds of dusty, mostly unlabeled wine bottles strewn everywhere. You need to watch your step. We found the doll on the first floor. As you advance down the first floor corridor, the first room to your left will look a lot like someone had been burning documents in a hurry about 80 years ago. The floor is littered with random old shoes, mostly ladies, and burnt pieces of paper. None of the shoes have pairs. From what we could distinguish, the papers were some kind of official records, and the like from the 1920s. Also, the floor is incredibly unstable. You might want to keep close to the walls. As you keep going down the corridor, you'll find more cobwebbed shoes and cases upon cases of empty wine bottles. Both of the shoes and bottles seem to be circa 1930s to 40s. Finally, the baby demon doll. In the doorway to what looks like used to be an old living room, you'll find an old, naked baby doll, possibly missing an eye. It'll be sitting on the doorstep in an ungodly contorted position, cobwebbed all over. My boyfriend and I decided to give one last act of kindness. I put it in this huge wooden trunk where we found it, in the corner of the room. She seemed happier there. This summer, however, we found the baby doll on a table in the middle of the same room, wrapped in a string of rosary beads. Yeah, Apart from the rotting floor and spooky looking curtains, there isn't much else to see on the first floor. However, if you somehow manage to make your way to the crumbling attic, you'll find yourself a truly delicious surprise. And by delicious, I mean creepy and puzzling as hell. While hanging around the mansion, we ran into an old man who apparently lived right next door. He said the house had been uninhabited and derelict for as long as he'd lived there, which was roughly 60 years or so. And you could definitely believe that, save for the attic. Even though the rest of the house looked like it had been hastily evacuated sometime in the first half of the 20th century, the attic had been inhabited as recently as the 90s or early 2000s. We found a child's room with modern-looking furniture painted red and green, school manuals from the time period, collectible stickers like the ones you get in chewing gum in the 90s, some colour photographs, and in the middle of the attic, a room where the floor caved in under a huge pile of rotting leather, fabric, and God knows what. The attic, to me at least, raised the most questions. Did a family move in? If so, how did the neighbour not see them? Why would they only occupy the attic? What about the rest of the house? We had to get out of there ASAP, as the whole structure was really unstable, and we could have dropped through the floors at any time. We're quite light, both of us, but we still had to walk close to the walls and only rest our entire weight on support beams and doorways. Of course we took photos of the whole shebang, and of course we plan on going back there until the house is completely engulfed by the small jungle around it. Of course we wondered for a while after if we'd acquired a curse in the process. I'm a big fan of getting out of the city and taking photos of abandoned homes, factories and the like. 3 summers ago, I went at an abandoned home in rural Kentucky. It was one of those places I always intended to go shoot, but just never got around to it. After driving about 30 minutes into the country, I found the place. It was the only time I've really felt creeped out, as I parked and grabbed my gear. I was standing in the overgrown drive, kind of assessing how badly I wanted to go inside. I decided to go ahead, despite my initial fear of that place. Once I got inside, it was a great place to photograph. Something right out of a horror flick. I kept looking over my shoulder like I was being watched, no matter where I went in the house. This uneasiness persisted. I went upstairs, through all the old bedrooms, pretty much every part of the home, before I decided to try the basement. The double doors were on the floor, giving me this scary, gaping doorway to enter. It was really too dark to shoot without a flash, and every time I would snap a shot, my mind would get carried away, and in the very back of the basement, I saw a light source. It was a newly lit candle. I immediately got the hell out of there. I get to the top of the stairs and make an abrupt run, and run right into a huge homeless guy. I went into a fighting stance, like some kind of crazy person, and this guy says, "I've been watching you take pictures the whole time." I would have said hey, but I didn't want to spook you. He offered to burn a doob with me. I chose to peel out and almost wrecked my car on the way out. I still do this, but never alone. The first time I did this after my run-in, I carried a .22 with me. I live in the north woods of Wisconsin. Up here, there's a lot of hidden places to find. Mostly because over the years, Many people like to hide out here. Al Capone had several beach houses and hides, for example. Me and a couple of friends went searching for a house we heard was haunted once. We didn't find the supposed haunted house, but we did find an old hidden driveway. It was too overgrown to be seen from the road. We just happened upon it while searching on foot, and a week later, we went back to see what was at the end. We found a 3-story Victorian house, pretty rotten and derelict. We got in through a hole in the wall that was in the back, worked our way past the bushes and pricklers, and we made it. Most of the place was gutted, and we had to tread carefully. There were rotten patches in the floor, so we really needed to watch out. This was old, and I mean old. The plumbing was ancient. No electrical outlets could be found. An old oil lamp sconces. We worked our way to the second floor and found a couple of bedrooms. What we think was once an office or study and a powder room. No cool antiques though. We were so caught up in there that we made it until dark, and that's when we reached the basement. There were 2 ways down. We used the stairs in the back because the front set seemed too unsafe. There we found an old furnace, a coal chute, and a few storage rooms. There wasn't much light down there. The bushes outside covered the windows, so that the only light came in from a hole in the upper flooring. Thing is, it was getting dark by the time we started snooping down there, so by the time we noticed it was already pretty dark out. We knew what we were doing though. We had the basics. 1 medkit, a light for each, and a rope we carried just in case. After looking around, we found some back storage rooms, both with thick metal doors. The first was already open and empty. The second was rusted shut. We didn't want to give up, so we found some old cast iron railings that fell from who knows where, and we were trying to pry that sucker apart. I say apart because first the handle came off. Then we stuck railing through the hole with the rope and just pulled it open. Took us better part of an hour to do so, but we were stubborn and we wanted to see what was in there. The room had no windows, so it was pretty dark. What we found was a bunch of old filing cabinets, a small desk with a chair, and most of the cabinets were seized shut due to age. But the ones that we got open had old documents. Nothing seemed special about the place, but by this point we were getting pretty tired. We finally noticed it was dark and decided to head out. But as we were slowly making our way back up the steps, we started to hear a howling sound from the basement. It got really loud, and we got freaked out. We paused long enough to search with our lights where it may have been coming from. But after that, fear took over, and we got the hell out of there. After we calmed down, and safely a few miles away, we started to talk about it. A friend figured it was actually the old coal furnace and the chimney above, like when you blow over the lip of the bottle, and that made the sound. But for the fun of it, we all decided it was just an angry spirit that got pissed, because we were searching through his shit. Much better explanation than exploring an old, maybe haunted house any day. That is, of course, until we returned, and tried to see if the noise would be reproduced. It was fairly windy outside, and some of us wanted to inspect those old documents. The wind never made a peep through that furnace. I mean, it sounded, but not like it did before. So we weren't really sure. Was it just a one-off? Were the angles just perfect the other night? Or was there really something down there? A spook trying to get us to leave? I guess we'll never know. I was exploring an abandoned hospital, built in the 1930s in an isolated mountain area to cure tuberculosis. The building wasn't very welcoming in itself, very communist style, but the mountains around it made it a nice place thanks to the view. I started by visiting the several floors, bedrooms, restaurant, administration, church, cinema, swimming pool. There was everything in this huge building to make life possible for a long stay, so it was a very interesting exploration. Some hallways seemed like burned. The walls were smoke black, but there weren't any traces of actual fire, burnt things or melted plastic. This fits the place, so I didn't worry more about it. I decided to keep the basement as dessert. Once I went there, things were very different. Technical rooms, storage of all kind and stuff, like rooms full of toilets, and of course almost no natural lighting. I went along a very long hallway, with all kind of pipes going through it. I don't remember exactly the map of the building, because it was years ago, but I remember that it was at this extremity of the hallway that there was the last room. I entered what seemed to be a little library, maybe a kindergarten, but why in the basement? There was nothing really special there, so I turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. On a pillar, there was a wide trace of living stuff explosion. Red liquid dripping along the wall, solid parts rotting. Everything indicated that someone's head exploded at this place, and I was looking at brain parts sticking a pillar inside a kindergarten. I decided it was time to end this exploration. I tried to explain to myself what else it could be, but couldn't find any other explanation. Even if I had never seen a crime scene or anything like that before, it was clear to see what a shotgun could do to someone's head. On the way back upstairs, I decided to use an emergency exit that shouldn't be locked since my way in was a bit tricky. I went at the end of the hallway and opened the door. To my surprise, this wasn't the exit, but a kind of tunnel going up the stairs. The potential frustration of missing a cool part of the building pushed me to go on, despite the crime scene I had just seen. After all, it's far away, and what's done is done. The tunnel went into a separate little house. I guess it was the house of the director, who built his own direct tunnel to the hospital, so he could travel between the two without going into the cold and snow. The tunnel made me enter the house from the basement. The first thing I saw when I entered was a door with a wide hole inside. Through the hole, I could see a creepy room with only a mattress and a dead fox laying in it. The creepiest part were the walls. They were covered in handwriting. Very scary. I'm going to kill the spider in my head. She doesn't want to stop talking. Don't yell. I'm already dead. Dozens of sentences like that. It went all over the room. A pile of books were sitting next to the mattress, and that's it. At this point, I decided I had seen enough of this place. I went back home trying to convince myself that all of this had a logical explanation. The confirmation came a few days later. Looking for information online about the place, I discovered that there was a movie filmed in this place a few years earlier. I found it and watched it. It was a serious movie with a semi-famous French actor. I don't remember airing on cinemas, but maybe it did. And of course, it was a zombie movie. It was very funny to watch a movie filmed entirely in the hospital. The plot was that an ambulance was stuck because of the snow and had to stop in this weird place. And then zombies. Nothing amazing, but it explained the dark walls that were made creepy for the movie, as well as the shotgun. I was right, a brain exploded there, but it was a zombie brain. So at the end, nothing was creepy anything else in this building. Well, not in the hospital, but the house. The movie never took place in the separate house. The room would have had some meaning in the scenario. No cutscene here, no explanation. I was exploring a massive old toy and game factory, built in the 60s with a buddy of mine. Due to the time it was built, it had a fallout shelter in the basement, which was still fully stocked. It was complete with cases of medical supplies, carbohydrate supplements, and a room filled with cans of water. So we're walking around and keep getting startled by echoes. In this 250,000 square foot factory floor, which all turned out to be pigeons. Then we hear footsteps. This factory is damn well sealed up, as the only way in was to remove a panel from a wooden garage-style door and crawl through it. We stop walking for a second, for a better listen, and they sound really far away, but getting a little louder, so we book it to the exit. Due to the time and size of the hole in the door, I have to remove my backpack and put it through first. As soon as I take it off and place it on the other side, I see a truck pointing right at me from the corner of the hole. I'm freaking out. There's absolutely no way the truck didn't see me, and I relay this to my friend next to me. Just a moment later, the truck starts to move, and I hope it's just leaving, but it pulls closer to my escape route. At this point I realize that the goose is cooked, as I'd been holding my hand outside in a frozen place for what felt like minutes. I eventually decide that the truck sees me, and I should just break out my "I'm doing my school photography project" story. So I go up to the truck and start talking, and he just looks at me and says, "Dude, I don't care what the hell you're doing in there. I just thought you were a raccoon, and was about to take out my .22 if you didn't pop out when you did." Turns out, exterminators are pretty cool dudes. I haven't been back to this location successfully since they've revamped their alarm system, but I'm still very active in the New England area. I rarely run into anything scary or horrifying. Usually it's just other explorers, taggers, or homeless, and they're always chill as long as you aren't being a dick. Buddy and I are in Costa Rica, in a smaller town called Cahuita for some fun. Nice little town, highly recommended. We are out on the town on our second night there, and have a nice little candlelit dinner by the ocean, having a bottle of wine while at it. We go to a bar afterwards and have several more drinks. I decide to walk home some sweet old lady from the States. She just moved to Costa Rica some years ago and lived in a small place all by herself down a jungle road. Halfway there, I realize I have no clue where I am or where my friend is. I turn around and start walking back the way I came, drunkenly, on a road made out of lots of fist-sized rocks. Luckily, we somehow find each other again, on a back jungle road in the middle of the night. No one in sight. At this point, very drunk, for whatever reason, we decide to do a little ecstasy. So we're having a good time, walking along the road, and I see a building through the trees. It's a decent-sized 2-story bungalow-type structure that looks abandoned. Windows boarded up, no lights. I love urban exploring. So we tromp on through the brush to the building. There is a handmade ladder going to the second-floor balcony. Front door windows are bolted nail shut tight. So we climb the ladder. We get up there, drunkenly stumbling around and having a grand old time. And he starts banging on the door up there, trying to pry it open. I see an opening in the overhanging ceiling, and after a boost from my friend, crawl up into the ceiling to look for a way in. I was certain I could get in. As I'm there, I hear rapid footsteps on the wood, and then a door slams open down below. I freeze in place. I see my friend down below raise his hand and hear angered shouting in Spanish. My friend backs up, and I peer down the balcony and see a man with a machete raised threateningly, shouting at my friend, only a few feet away. He has no knowledge of my existence, and I, in my drunken state, forget that he kind of knows a decent amount of Spanish and is babbling about how he's stupid and he'll leave, and he was just trying to have fun. I'm watching, waiting with my breath held, and after a moment the man lowers his machete. I decide this is a good time to announce my presence, without warning, and I drop from the opening of the balcony between them two and say buenas noches. The man takes a step back surprised, but does not scream buenas noches. He screams, "No buenas noches, you go back to where you came from now." To which I respond, Sí, lo siento mucho. We turn, hoping not to die, and descend the very tiny rickety ladder to the ground, about 15 feet below, and get the hell out of there. Unfortunately, we'd both taken off our shoes to climb the ladder, and in our haste forgot to grab them. So we drunkenly made our way back to a cabina in the dark middle of the night, on that horribly rocky road without shoes, drunk and high on adrenaline and life. It was a rough morning, but at least we were alive. My old college roommate had a knack for adventures, and he was always looking for cool places to explore. In the hall outside the cafeteria, there was this big metal latch on the ground, and naturally he tried to open it. It wasn't locked, and he immediately came back to the dorms to tell me about it, and we decided that that night, when no one was around, we would go down. Night came and we went in. There was a small ladder with about 10 steps, which led to one long, pitch-black tunnel. So we got out our phones for lighting. At first we were super disappointed. We walked to the end of the tunnel and it just being a dead end. Nothing of interest. That is until we noticed a small door down near our feet, a little bigger than half our size, and wouldn't you know that it was also unlocked. So we had to go further. The new area was a lot smaller. It wasn't so small that we were crawling, but our knees couldn't fully extend. This new area was a lot larger too. It was a series of veiny tunnels that all strung together. We were down there for a solid hour exploring. We ran across a few doors, but they were all locked. Then we turned down this one tunnel, and it felt like that area at the beginning of the Ocarina of Time, when you're first learning to crawl through holes. Just a small hole that was big enough to crawl through. We shined our lights down it. It wasn't very long. We'd only been crawling for a few seconds before arriving at the other side. We knew what we had to do. And so we got on our hands and knees and crawled on in there. The other side had one corner and then a door. Naturally, we tried to open it, and it was unlocked. It honestly may not seem freaky just listening, but there was this wave of discomfort that washed over us. We opened the door and we found a small room. In the middle of the room was a table and a single chair, with one very dimly lit lantern sitting on the table. My buddy and I took one look at each other and noped out of there, and went as fast as we could back through the crawley hole, through the small tunnels, and into the big tunnel, and back up the ladder. I know the room was probably just some sort of maintenance room or something like that, but something about that dimly lit lantern sitting on that lone table in the middle of a pitch black room will always stick with me, like something straight out of a horror film. A few years ago, I got a text from a friend while I was working, saying that he found an abandoned house deep in the woods off a trail, that he tried approaching the house, but some old lady came up to him and told him not to go in there. This was on a Tuesday, and I told him I was at work, so we'd have to go at night. Night comes, and I made my way over to his place, a couple of cities over, and we head down the trail to go find this house. The house looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was in the middle of the woods, and at the end of a very long driveway, surrounded by trees and darkness. I mean, you couldn't hear a single sound, or even see a single light. We walked around the house to try and find an entry point, but all the windows had been smashed in and replaced by boards, nails, and 2x4s. Our only option was the front door, which was also boarded up and locked with a padlock. My buddy decides we should try and break in, seeing as no one probably lives here, and no one would be around to see us or even care. So we hike back down the trail and go find something we could use to break in. We end up finding a park where the city has planted trees. We took the big steel rods planted around the saplings used to help them keep level while they grow, and headed back towards the house. We get to the house and start trying to break down the front door. We were kicking and prying the padlock with the steel rods. It's now close to 3 a.m, in the middle of nowhere, deep in the woods on a Tuesday night. With every kick, the door is moving more and more, and we're getting a solid 2 feet of give with every kick. The wood is cracking, and we're almost in. All of a sudden, it starts getting bright. I mean really bright. Too bright to be the sun starting to come out. And I turn around and see 6 trucks speeding down the driveway towards us. I yell to my buddy and tell him we have to get the hell out of here. As the trucks pull up to the house, we raced around in a sprint into the trees. This happened to be at the top of a very steep hill in the woods. We're running down it and tripping every other step because we're in complete darkness and can't see what's afoot in front of us. I look back and there are a bunch of men with flashlights following us, so I run faster. All of a sudden I drop. I feel a sharp pain in my left thigh and can't move. There was a sudden drop in the hill and I landed on a fallen tree. My leg was bleeding, but the men were still following us, so I had to get up and keep going. When we reach the bottom of the hill, our feet are submerged. We're in a stream or small river of sorts. It's only knee-deep, so we cross it. Once on the other side, we find ourselves at the bottom of another hill, so we climb up and look for an exit to the forest. Once at the top, after what felt like an eternity of climbing, we see some light piercing through the trees up ahead. It must be morning. So we head over to the edge of the forest and find a cul-de-sac, and we hear a car speeding towards us. So we hide in the bush and wait to see if the men in the trucks were coming to look for us on the other side of the ravine. It was a cop, doing about 80 in a residential neighborhood with no sirens or lights. We wait for him to reach the end of the cul-de-sac and start walking towards civilization. For the next hour, as we were making our way back home, we must have seen 10 or more cop cars all driving around the neighborhood, and we were just walking through it. Every time we'd hear a cop, we'd jump into a bush and wait for it to go by. We got back to my buddy's place at 5:30 a.m. He was bummed that we never got into the abandoned house, but I was relieved. Had we been inside, I wouldn't have seen the trucks pull into the driveway, and who knows what kind of trouble we would have gotten into. When I was in high school, I drove by an old abandoned farmhouse every day. It was beautiful, lace curtains in the windows, and it always intrigued me. One day, my best friend and I decided to do a little exploring. We skipped our last period of class and headed to the farmhouse. In order to get onto the property, we had to climb a fence, but it was easy enough to do. Once we got onto the property, we realized that there were several buildings, but they were mostly collapsed or taken over by overgrowth. There was also a ton of debris in the yard around the house. The windows in the house had all been broken, so there were broken dishes, old moldy books, and strips of the lace curtain. We started getting uneasy when we realized that the house had been abandoned for at least a few decades, and that it was obvious that whoever lived there had left everything they owned. It was like they left to run an errand one afternoon and never came back. We went into the back door, which opened into the kitchen, behind the trash and leaves. There was this old 50s style refrigerator and a bunch of other old appliances. Nothing out of the ordinary. We could see through a little hallway into the living room, which had all the old furniture in it, but we couldn't get into it because the floor had rotted through. We walked into the next room, which looked like it was originally a dining room. This was the only room in which the original furniture had been removed. There were makeshift shelves all around the walls. All covering those shelves were baggies of bullets. Thousands of them. There were shell casings all over the floor of the room too. Everything from BBs to shotgun ammo. I am by no means a gun/ammunition expert, but my friend recognized some of the types. We got pretty freaked out and bolted. The next day at school, I told my friend all about the bullet-filled creepy farmhouse, and no one believed me. So I decided to go back again. I took another friend with me, and when we went into the back door, the house had been gutted. The fridge, the curtains, the living room furniture, and most importantly, the bullets were all gone. I have no clue how they got the big living room furniture out over the rotten floor, or how they accomplished all of this in 24 hours. I can't imagine who was using this house and what they used it for, but it scared the crap out of me. I should mention the house sat empty for another year or so before it was torn down. The other buildings on the property are still there though, still buried in the overgrowth. We're staying at this hotel resort that used to be a ski resort, but the ski resort got shut down. No problem, still pretty nice. We walked through the mountains and everything, and it was a really nice hike. Looked like it had some pretty awesome bike trails, but we forgot our bikes and never went riding. We drove into town that day to see my brother's band play, and passed by the old ski lodge, overgrown with plants and shit, obviously abandoned. It looked awesome. Me and my girlfriend say that we want to check it out, and of course my sister and her boyfriend agree, although her boyfriend was a little hesitant. He wants to go into a field having to do a little bit with the law. I didn't ask my dad or stepmom, but of course my dad heard and decided he wanted to go too. It hits about 10 p.m. and we decide it's late enough that not many cars will be driving by. So we start the walk down the street. It was a roundabout way, but it was better than walking through the overgrown fields. My dad decided he wanted to go running through the fields, and he is going to meet us there. We arrive and find a window about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. Not very large, and it's broken. I climb on it, set up a table, and help everyone else through. Throughout the whole visit, every once in a while someone would say, "Shh, turn your lights off, a car's gonna see." They were so damn worried about it for some reason. But I'd turn my light off and then not be able to see because my eyes couldn't adjust. We're walking around and me and my girlfriend come to a room that's packed with shit. But there's a little hole in the wall that led to a crevice in between two walls. I climb in to check it out, and the drywall is broken into another room. A room that was locked. I climb in, held the drywall open for my girlfriend, and the first thing in the room is some sort of Chuck E. Cheese massive mascot costume head. That was pretty creepy. We found 2 pairs of car keys, which were probably abandoned. My dad came through the back door and met us, and we also found a fairly new door in the basement with a brand new lock on it. I wanted to break it down, but I wasn't going to do that with basically my whole family there. We roam around and it's a little creepy, but we decide it's time to leave, mostly because everyone was outside except me and my girlfriend. We go to the window and see my dad, sister and a boyfriend saying that they're ready to go. My girlfriend climbs the window and is having a little trouble. She's taking her time, and it's been maybe half a minute, and she's trying to get through this window before I have a chance to say something. And I start to hear a very loud, purposeful stomping coming up the stairs. My girlfriend starts to freak out, as do I, because I'm stuck inside, and there's a whole bunch of, "What the hell are you doing, Jesus Christ? Just go!" until she starts yelling that her foot is stuck, which I realise it is. I basically pop the foot out, and she's out in a second, and I basically dive out the window. The second I'm out the window, I turn around. It's my dad. My girlfriend was climbing through the window, so my dad ran back around, snuck in, and stomped up the stairs to mess with us. I don't think I've ever been so afraid in my life. I was literally stuck in that lodge with God knows who stomping up the stairs, and I was not going to push my girlfriend out the window. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's installment of Scary Stories. Exploring abandoned places is something I've always been very interested to do. However, where I live, there aren't many abandoned places, and if there are, they're usually very well protected to keep the likes of urbex explorers out. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to drop a comment and a like, as it goes a long way. You could always subscribe and hit the little bell icon to be notified every time I post. I do post daily, just so that you have your nightly spooks waiting for you when you go to sleep. If you'd like to submit a story to have me read it, all that you need to do is share it to my email or Reddit, and be sure to include plenty of punctuation, paragraphing, and description to guarantee your story's read. But anyway, for now guys, I am going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.